spinny wheel, and we are live. It says so. Good evening and welcome to We Need to Talk About Sunday, the podcast. I guess it's a podcast where we talk about, we have a chat about last Sunday's service at Romsey Methodist Church. And it was you again, Andrew. So you're with us again for another week. Yeah. Thank you for coming back.
That's okay. Second time.
Being happy to join in and have more questions put to you.
Yeah.
And I have a few more questions. I think as we were just looking through them, I do give Andrew a brief warning of what they're going to be, just so that we don't get
2 minutes.
Yeah, just 2 minutes. It's a very brief, but some of them are a bit more. Oh yeah, these are a bit more complicated this week. So I think it'll be I think we'll have a good discussion and conversation on this.
Yeah.
But we did favourite bread last week.
Yep.
This week, someone wanted to know what sort of bread did Jesus have? Is our first question.
What sort of bread did Jesus have? I think probably linking into the flat bread that we had on Sunday when we're thinking about bread for community. That would be the kind of bread that Jesus would have. If memory serves me right, and somebody else may want to correct me, I think it was probably a fairly coarse kind of bread, barley, wheat, flour, salt, water mixed together. But I think a flat bread, like the focaccia bread that we had on Sunday, would be the kind of bread Jesus would have been eating.
Yeah, I completely forgot that Funday Sunday made that bread.
Yeah, they did.
It would be, I guess, like that. I think something I read said cooked. Like normally, I guess your day-to-day bread might just be cooked on like a hot stone, and it did make me think of them having the frying pans on the what are they called, the like ceramic hob things we brought into church that they were cooking on the front of. I say, yeah, okay, it's probably exactly like that. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yes, for those that don't, although I guess most people have seen, but yes, on Sunday was also Funday Sunday, and unusually for me, I wasn't there because I wasn't very well. But it did mean I got to see the service from the comfort of my sofa, which is nice to be able to join in with that in that way. But I did pop in briefly to help set up, and I could see all of the sort of the safety precautions in place for them cooking this bread at the front of the church.
Very important.
Yes,
but they had a great time.
Yes, I'm told they had lots of fun.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll crack on because we've got questions. So, the big one, I guess, and same as we talked about last week. Was there anything you didn't have time for? And of course, I asked this knowing that we forgot it was communion until
thank you for embarrassing
quite close to Sunday. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's all right.
But I thought actually, if there's a chance then that you had to cut stuff out that you'd have liked to get in there, I imagine having to fit communion in an otherwise service you didn't.
The minister forgot that it was communion, but was grateful that Jason had looked at the plan the day before and saw that it was communion. Everybody else at church knew it was communion. It was all set up beautifully, perfectly, as always. It was just completely me that I forgot to put it in the order of service.
It wasn't only you. There were a couple of other people as well. And I said, "Is it communion?" Sort of, because I didn't see it. And they're like, "No, it's not communion." Are we sure? But did that mean that there was stuff you didn't have time
did that mean I had to shorten my sermon in order to incorporate something else? I think, yes, the area I didn't really cover much. I spoke about it briefly in the sermon was the thought about, we were talking about bread for community. I was talking about community, the story of Zacchaeus from Luke 19. And for me, something about bread is there, flat bread is there on the table to be torn apart by people, to tear off their piece and everything, being part of community around the table. But Zacchaeus was isolated from his community, and the sense of Zacchaeus not being able to see Jesus. He was short in stature, we were told, and the crowd were preventing him from seeing Jesus. So reflecting a little bit about Zacchaeus' potential isolation. And that linked in a bit with the reasons why, because he was somebody who was taking quite a bit of money through the taxes being collected as a tax collector, was quite a wealthy guy. And people were feeling that he should not get close to Jesus. But there was something I briefly spoke about, which was how do we use the resources that we have been blessed with? This is not a story, as so many of Jesus's stories are not about not having wealth. It's about how we view that, how we use that. Zacchaeus made some pretty immediate decisions to give recompense to the people he had defrauded over time. And so there's something for me that I didn't have the chance to explore further, was how do we use the resources that we've been blessed with, that God has given to us to steward? And do we see what we have as being ours, or do we see what we have as being still gifts from God, which we have to use within the kingdom of God? So that would have been an area I would have gone on to develop more if I had not realised, not been told it was communion, and I needed to keep my sermon a bit shorter.
Oh, that's interesting, because actually, when you say it like that, I was thinking about in like Paul's letters, we read about some of the sort of, I guess, patrons of the early church, don't we?
Yeah.
And actually, often they are people of means, they are relatively rich, and sometimes well-to-do people. And that change we see from people like Zacchaeus, where in the New Testament, where the rich people are, there are various parables and various encounters that Jesus had. So then in the epistles, where they're actually making a difference and making stuff happen with that money, that's really interesting.
And we remember things like Jesus saying to the rich young man, go and sell everything you have. It's that kind of recognition that some things are becoming God for us with a small g, and are taking over our life, and we're putting more energy and effort into those things than we should be in respect of God and the kingdom of God.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just going to try and find and make sure I can find where we are online. Because and Andrew knows this, and no one else does yet. I am not using my normal laptop, because I literally opened it up to set this all up to go, and it's completely broken. So in the 10 minutes beforehand, I'm using a different laptop. I've connected it up and everything, and we're just kind of working. But it means that I wasn't as prepared as I should have been. And I'm trying to find our channel, just so I can look at any comments that people might send in. And then there we go. Now I can see it. So now if anyone live chats, I will be able to see it, which is good.
Good.
Oh, dear me. It's been one of those weeks.
It's technology.
It's fine when it works.
Yes, it is. Of course it is. It's brilliant.
There we go. So what was I going to say? Oh, yes. So thinking back to Zacchaeus, so I remember I had Zacchaeus, I think last year I did a sermon on Zacchaeus. And did some of the sort of I guess the backstory of what it means to be a tax collector, and it's really fascinating, really interesting to read up on. And one of the things that they point out that you don't really get in the scripture is that it's inherently a job that sort of goes hand in hand with violence. And if you are, Zacchaeus is like chief tax collector, so he has people that effectively get paid to get the money, right? So they're, he will send the heavies round, as it were, and so that is part of that isolation, is that obviously the Jewish community is just, violence is anathema to them, and so that's part of that. And that he's, I guess, not just it's more than I don't know. You can read the Gospels and hear that word sinner and think, and actually, as we extrapolate it today, we think about it as being like a byword for just the wrong kind of person. Rather than thinking, well, actually, here is someone, or even someone who's, whatever it may made poor life choices, but actually with Zacchaeus, here is someone who is objectively a bad guy, I guess. And it's not just it's the kind of person that you don't expect. It's the person you least expect to be invited around, and that kind of thing.
That's right.
I think that's a really interesting. Well, obviously the way in and the interesting part of Zacchaeus' story for who he is and where he comes from and why he's up that tree.
And that's helpful because we don't get that kind of detail within the Gospels. You have to read further and further and study more and more, don't you, to get that more detailed background to that. But yeah, I mean, Zacchaeus climbing the sycamore tree just would have been a completely unusual thing. This wealthy guy doing that. If you've got the wealth, you do it a different way. But there was something that was driving Zacchaeus to do that, and God at work within Zacchaeus's heart, just pushing him to do something different.
Yeah. And what was I read it sort of. I forget where I read it. Something about sort of putting oneself in the path of Jesus.
Yeah.
So it's and sort of, although. Yeah, it's not just Jesus coming to him or him going to Jesus. There's both of them coming towards each other.
There's something happening for both of them at that moment, isn't there? For Jesus to turn and see Zacchaeus, and for Zacchaeus to have put himself in the eyesight of Jesus, be it up a tree, because he couldn't do it from behind the crowd of people who were there. So there's something, I think something driving both of them, something at work within both of them. We would want to say God at work in both of them, drawing them to that particular moment and that meeting place, that meeting point for both of them, which for Zacchaeus was a truly transformational moment.
So I've got more. The questions get more difficult as we go this evening. So here's another one that we had. There should be a question mark on the end of that, but pretend there is.
That's all right, yeah.
But it says, our website says you don't have to believe to belong, but are there too many barriers for that to be the case? That when we, or perhaps a better way of phrasing that is, when we say you don't have to believe to belong, do we really mean that?
I think it's interesting. The question back for me would be, what kind of barriers are we thinking about? Are there too many barriers for that to be the case? I suspect there are, to be honest, and I would think, I wonder perhaps from being within the church, we would like to say, no, there are no barriers, but the reality is we place barriers there probably without even thinking about them. Might talk about Romsey in particular. We are a church which is in a particular demographic with regard to the town of Romsey to a certain extent. Are we a place where people expect us to have to be able to have some wealth in order to attend a church like Romsey? We might say that we don't demand an offering from anybody coming in. We don't take up an offering during an act of worship now. There are other ways and opportunities of doing that. But I suspect for a number of people, there will be a certain expectation that you need to have some money to be able to go to church, because that's what people will expect for money to be given. Do we expect people to have a certain academic ability in order to be able to engage with what we're talking about, what we're sharing, etc.? Do people think they've got to have some sort of experiences in order to be able to come to church? Because whether we like it or not, the media and the history of the church, I think, has left people with a sense that there are certain things that we expect people to believe, to be able to say, to be able to make statements about how they should act. And I think all of those potentially become barriers for people to say, I don't think I can go there because I don't think I'm going to be welcomed or be able to be a part of it. Why do we stand up to sing hymns on the whole? Why do we sit down? Why do we...
Why sing at all? Right?
Why sit at all? Yeah, all of that. I think those are all potential barriers for people. I'm probably going off tangent, but I think for me today we've had the Presbyteral Synod for ordained ministers in the Southampton district, and this afternoon we were engaged in conversation about the theology of safeguarding, and the reminder there about how our language, how the metaphors we use, the symbols, the objects we have, how we have to be so careful about what they could be saying to people. And we need to engage in conversation with people to understand what they're saying to people and how people are experiencing things, because all of those can become barriers for people at some point and restrict them from potentially coming into the church. That's a very long-winded answer. So
no, it's helpful. It's really good, and it's I think, yeah, it's definitely a difficult question, isn't it? It's I think the singing one is interesting because that's come up before in conversations I've had. Like, what if you want to be a Methodist but you don't like singing? You're like, and I remember my experience. Funny enough, I think it might be my first synod or something like that, and I was expecting it to be more. Well, I was expecting kind of I don't know, more business meeting-y, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. There was a point in the agenda where we just stopped and sang, just in the middle of business, and I thought, that's really weird. Well, and if you don't like singing, this is even weirder, because it's that slightly different context, because it's not worship, and you're with potentially a different group of people that you don't know, and you're like, Like, and if I, as someone who's been singing in church for 30 years, thought, that's weird.
That's weird, yeah. I wouldn't do that at work, in a business meeting. So
I often joke about it at work meetings now. I like, or say, should we start with a prayer or something, joking?
Yeah.
I've done that. That's happened. But yeah, I've got a second part to this question.
Okay.
I can find it over here somewhere. Oh yeah, so there's a separate step to that. Let me add it and hide that. Is there anything we could do to help make that not, you don't have to believe to belong statement a reality?
Yeah. I think for me, I think to a certain extent we're doing it at Romsey in the way that we are recognizing our calling to offer hospitality. Hospitality which does not require us to expect something of the people that we're offering hospitality to. So I think the more that we can make our community open to people to come and share, explore, just come in and wonder what on earth's going on. So doing the MAF Day, Community Day the other weekend with the plane outside, it's kind of, okay, what's this about? So I think all of those opportunities for me are the chance for us to just encourage people to be able to come in and explore something of who we as a community at the church are about. So I think the more we can do that, I think, from my experience and conversations with people, is really helpful for them to realize that we're not a strange group of people performing strange acts or anything like that. We are trying to live out a life of faith in a particular way because we have a Methodist emphasis to what we were about. But actually, we are, we enjoy the fun, the laughter. We are there to support one another in the sad times. We are a community trying to live out our life of faith in a particular way.
I a funny anecdote that kind of goes with this, because I was reading on it was on Blue Sky. Someone posted, and it was one of those anonymous sort of confession posts, and they said, I've started going to church.
Right.
Started going to church, and it said the Jesus stuff is nonsense, but the coffee and cake at the end of the service is amazing, and you get to have a nice chat with these lovely people.
Yeah.
And I guess well, that's fine, right?
Yeah, it is absolutely.
Experience our church. That's
Yeah. The Jesus stuff may be ridiculous to a lot of people, and that's absolutely fine, because I don't think any of us as Christians are claiming we understand it all, and it's a bit weird and it's a bit strange at times. But actually, that's the beginning of the journey. That's about people, going back to the earlier part of the question, about people having the chance to belong to a community without actually having to believe everything that the community says you've got to believe this in order to be a part of us. It's actually saying, if I go along because the food's really great or the company's really good and the conversation's fantastic, great, absolutely great.
There was a great it's some years ago now. There's a documentary on Channel 4, and they took a number of families that have no faith and basically injected them into church communities and various different denominations. And then the documentary crew followed how they got on. And it was really interesting. And I think the premise was, would just being a part of this community then lead to faith, or what have you? TV or whatever. But it was interesting watching like the community that people felt and were engaged with was real. And I think that surprised people. That then became part of a church, not looking for belief or anything like that at all, but became part of a community that they saw a real tangible value to. But I guess my sort of challenge with that is, I'd like to think that in any community of faith, that if we are living faithfully, that if we, and in the Spirit, doing what God is calling us to do, that anyone who is part of that community for any amount of time, well, long enough, let's say, would witness God moving in that place. I think that. I believe that has to be the case. I don't know.
I think as well, sometimes in Christian communities, I think we beat ourselves up because we're not doing enough. And yet the reality is, it's not up to us, it's up to God. If God has brought that person to the community and prompted that person to come because actually the coffee is good and the cake is really tasty, then that's okay. It's up to God. God's at work in that person. It's not us. We're called to respond to what God is asking of us and to be faithful to what God is asking of us. And how God's asking us to create a community in a way which God then will bring other people to be a part of.
So I guess leading on to that, so one of the things that we, where have I put it? Yes, there we go. This one. So one of the things that is big in the community at Romans Methodist Church is the Beacon Cafe, which is sort of, we've registered, I don't know what the word is, but we are a chatty cafe, which is a national,
signed up for it.
That's it. It's a national movement, national thing to have conversations in our cafe to help with loneliness, but also communication and conversation and community. All the C's. But going on from that, then, do you have any tips in how those scenarios we can share, whether it's our story or having conversations of faith, so that people that are sort of coming into our community can start to understand a bit more about who we are and what's going on, I guess.
I think the chatty cafe thing is really good because people recognise that with the yellow sign on the table, if I'm going to sit there, people are going to come and talk to me, and that's really good. That's really good. Again, I think it's not trying to get ourselves worked up to think that we've got to have a lot of theological answers and we've got to be able to reel them off pat. When somebody says, "So tell me about the Christian faith," I've very rarely had anybody, even when the fact I wear a dog collar when I'm out and about, sort of thing, saying to me, "So tell me about the Christian faith," and give me a long theological answer, please. Actually, what they're more interested in is sharing something about themselves. And I think a chatty cafe, having conversations about faith, is actually being able to listen well to start with. So actually listen well to people and be in the moment with them, as opposed to thinking, what's my answer going to be to this question they may just be asking. It's actually just being present with them. So I think actually the first thing for me is always about listening well. And I do find, like probably most of us, people are quite happy to talk about themselves. So, a question about just tell me something of your story, or have you come far today? Do you live locally? Have you been inside this church before? All those sorts of questions are just enabling people to start talking about who they are and why they're there. And that often I find leads on to something that might be a bit more faith related as to why they've come into a church in particular. And I think allowing people to feel comfortable and that you've got a real interest in them and listening to them, I think is hugely important. And for me, it's very much, I try and encourage people to say, but talk about your understanding of faith. Don't try and talk about somebody else's. Because I think what people want to be able to do is know that the person they're chatting to is actually genuine. And I think the best we can be is to talk about ourselves. And I'm sure people who know me well will have heard me say, and I've done it in sermons as well, I don't have the answer to this, but these are my wanderings. You know, it's kind of saying it's okay not to have complete answers, but be ready to say, when somebody says, so when did you feel you became a Christian, or when did you start to believe, or what does it feel like for you coming to church to worship? Be prepared to answer those questions, but answer them honestly from your point of view, and say how you feel about it. So why do you go to church? So yeah, in almost rehearsing, if you know you're going to be somebody who's going to sit in a chatty cafe and engage with people who come into church, actually you do need to give a bit of time, just a little bit of time to think, how would I answer the question about why do you go to church? You know, why do you come to this church? You may want to start talking about the community, what goes on at the church. You may want to start talking about your own faith, and when you if you recognize you came to faith at a particular moment, or like me, my faith has developed over time, and an awareness of some sense of God being there. So I think for me, it's about being genuine. And being willing just to talk about your experience rather than anybody else's.
Yeah, that's great. They're great answers. That's really helpful. Thank you, Andrew. I think from what you're saying, that taking that, especially that first bit, those initial conversations, it feels to me very much like we want to do evangelism. Yeah. But actually, you can get too hung up on that, and the important bit is the friendship. Like, be a good friend, and then that's I don't know. Is that a fair sort of summary of that attitude?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's about being yourself. God doesn't call us to be people we know. He knows that we can't be. So it's about being ourselves. So for some people, just thinking about the Beacon Cafe, for example, some people's ministry, their calling is to be serving there, is to be the folk who thankfully make the cakes for us, and who do the teas for us and the coffees, and offer a welcome and a smile. There will be others who will sit at the chatty cafe, at the chatty table, and have the conversations with people. There'll be others who will be busy doing stuff around the church. So it's about knowing, what is God asking of me, and being prepared to honor that. For some people, there will be a calling to be a very different kind of evangelist, and a very different kind of person who's able to talk about faith in a very specific way. Some of us, like you and I, are called to be preachers. So, we are called and able to share reflections at the front of church in a service, etc., etc. But we're honouring those different callings.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you. That's a fabulous answer, I feel, to that question. I hope everyone watching was taking notes. So I have, I think, one more. I said it was tricky, this one. It's a tricky question. It's so tricky that I've not really written it up. But because I was re-listening to the sermon again earlier today,
right.
And there's an interesting point for me, sort of in listening back, where you talked about Zacchaeus being, I forget the word used, convicted, something like that, and then putting it right, what he had done wrong. So I'm doing that injustice, and then that in our relationship with God, God may call us to do the same sort of thing, that we will need to put right the things that we have done wrong. And I thought it was interesting, because for Zacchaeus, actually, that's quite a blatant, here is the thing he has done wrong, and it's quantifiable. He has the accounts even, and he can undo that. He can make those restitutions, and it's kind of it feels like that's quite easily resolved at the end of that passage, where it says, well, I'll pay back everything I owe, and more to the poor, etc. And I was thinking, for us, how is that? I feel like it's harder for us because
Right.
it's not we can't. I don't think it's as obvious. We know what we get wrong, but it's perhaps not as obvious or as nasty as what
Yeah.
Zacchaeus is up to.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to tease out, and this is why it's such a long-winded and bad question. Sorry, bath time's happening next door. I'm trying to tease out what might that look like for us. What does putting sort of the injustice we've caused right look like in our context, perhaps as individuals, but also as a congregation, where perhaps we think, well, we've not done anything wrong.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
I think my response initially would be twofold. One is there's a personal response. Zacchaeus, Jesus didn't tell him what to do. Zacchaeus sensed within him, and this is what he said he's going to do. So there was something, again, God at work in Zacchaeus' heart and mind, which said, I need to put this right. I know what I've done wrong. I need to put it right. So it's almost like in that split second, it was very clear for Zacchaeus. Now, that's not to say, I don't think, that it had not been brewing for a long time for Zacchaeus. There was obviously something which was driving Zacchaeus to try and fight his way through the crowd to see Jesus. He'd obviously heard about him. He knew he was coming into the neighborhood. He wanted to see him. And something pushed him to climb the tree. You know, he was so determined. So there may have been something, God at work in Zacchaeus for some considerable time to reach him to that point. So in his own mind, he may already have been thinking about, you know, I've done things wrong here. This isn't how I want to live my life, but I don't know where to go with this. And it needed that moment for that split second moment almost for him and Jesus to make contact, and for him to say, now I know what I need to do. And this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to respond. So we read it as if it's a very sudden thing, but I wonder if it actually was quite something that had been, you know, bubbling away, burning away within Zacchaeus for some time, and he reached that point. But I think it's up to us to work out for ourselves, what is it that I feel I'm being pushed now by, because I've reached a sense of hearing something about Jesus. I've heard Jesus calling my name, as I was talking about in the sermon, and there's something I want to respond, and God's been at work in me, and I know there's something I need to put right. What is the putting right? Is it about a relationship that's not working well? Is it about something, you know, that Zacchaeus we sense with the fraudulent activities that he was involved in, etc.? What is it I need to put right? How do I put that right? And what does that mean for me? So I think there's something very individual from that. I think the other part, because we were talking about community on Sunday, is okay, and what does the community need to put right? What is the community being challenged to think about? From a church point of view, as the Christian church worldwide, rather than the Methodist denomination that we're part of, for example, there probably are a number of things. We hear about them, we read about them. You know, I spoke about safeguarding matters just now. That's been quite a thing over many decades now, that we need to continue to, as a church and as communities, seek forgiveness for, and be able to work at putting things right, you know, as far as we possibly can. So I think that collectively, community-wise, there are some things that we have to think about. What do we need to do to put right? So there's something personal, there's something collectively, and we have to work at it. We have to talk about it and be prepared to be honest with each other in those conversations. And I know sometimes as a minister, part of my calling is to share the journey with people as they seek to put some things right. And for some people, the realization that actually there are some really important things they need to put right, and that's going to have an impact on them and on their future.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, that's helpful, and it's interesting to think about. It's interesting for me because this feels like, the Zacchaeus story as well and how it's framed here. This feels like a departure from faith as being, you just have to believe. right? That's it. That's enough,
Mm.
and maybe that is. But here is another case of someone, and again, we've talked about examples where we need to actually respond to injustices and do something. Actually, do something about the problems that, that we've caused, or the problems that we see. And I always find that interesting, because I think the prevailing media presented form of Christianity is one that's not as interested in that, and is much more interested in just what happens in here and in here, and not what goes on, not what we're doing in the world. And I think, what you've been saying and stories like Zacchaeus help to ground what we as Methodists believe in that. Oh, sorry. The last thing I said to the boys was, do try and be quiet at bath time, because Dad's recording, and of course,
let them be boys. Let them be boys.
If anything, they're louder. But oh, bless them. But yeah, so thank you, Andy. That's been super helpful. And I think, was there anything else you wanted to? Have we covered everything you were hoping we would?
I just looked at my notes quickly a minute. No, I don't think so, actually.
Lovely.
I think I've covered everything that I was thinking of further.
Well,
thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for joining, and thank you to those that sent in questions for us to talk about. And I hope that you've got something out of those answers that can help you in your focaccia journey this week.
Yeah.
Bread for community. I will pray, and then we'll say goodbye, I guess.
Thanks, Jason.
So let's pray. Father God, we thank you for Andrew and his message to us this week on the theme of bread for community, and all the insights that he shared with us in Zacchaeus' story, and what that can mean for us in our lives today. And I pray for especially us and the community at Romsey Methodist Church, that you would help us in those conversations that we have, especially with those people that we invite into our community, and you'll just help us to be hospitable and friendly, and to have good conversations. Amen.
Amen.
Super. Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You can see there's as many as 5 people watching, so I know a lot more will catch up in the week, so that's nice. Hopefully, we'll be back next week. I'm waiting on something I'm waiting on confirmation from John of if and when we'll be able to do that. I think John's next week. Thank you. Good. And we'll see where we go from there. So thank you very much, and I will say goodbye. Bye.